Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch, your host, and today we have another special guest for you guys. And before we get started, just one thing for me. If it's your first time tuning in, go over to the YouTube channel, show some love, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell notification so you guys be notified every time we drop a new episode. And today's guest, yes, you guys already know we have another amazing guest for you guys, Sheila Clemenson. And just a little bit about her before I bring her up. She is the founder of Transitional Coaching LLC with over 25 years of experience. Of expertise. I'm sorry, I tripped on my words that time. She is a certified career coach, HR consultant, grief wellness professional, and new book author. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring her up. But before I do that, I want to remind everyone this is for educational purposes only. All right. So, but get your questions ready. I'm bringing her up, and we're going to have a great conversation.
Hi,
How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Tony. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yes. I've been looking forward to this since the first time that we talked. We had such a great conversation. I can't wait to dive deeper into it. Wow. Yes.
Awesome.
Well, before we get started, tell people who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, I'm Sheila Clemenson. I am the owner and founder of Transitions Coaching Services. It's based here in Colorado,
Mhm.
outside of Louisville. I'm in Louisville, outside of Boulder. And not originally from here, but I married a Colorado native, so he tells me that I can stay.
It's beautiful out here. What you talking about?
It is beautiful out here. I'm from Michigan originally, from the Detroit area, and so I'm a Midwesterner who has relocated here, and absolutely love Colorado. And I know this is your stomping grounds too.
Yes. I'm in Loveland.
I I have had my own grief journey, like so many of you. Um, from a young age, my father, he committed suicide when I was 5 years old, and I share that because I kind of started in this world kind of from that place, right?
Right.
And walking the journey of having a single mom, having being a single child, moving forward, wanting a family and then connecting with a family, a step parent, and then having a brother and kind of moving forward through that, right? But ultimately, what really took me to my grief journey was my first husband, Grant. He was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And he
Mhm.
was diagnosed when we had been dating for a few years. Um, we had just gotten engaged. We bought a house. We were planning a wedding. He was 32. I was 26. And it was like the rug was pulled out from under us.
Right.
So I share that because you don't expect something like that to happen at that point as you're growing in your life, professionally as well as personally, and connecting with the love of your life and moving forward, making plans to be together, have a family, etc. Um, I had been dating Grant for a while. It was an international whirlwind kind of relationship. He was in European sales, and it was really a very romantic dream come true when he came into my life.
Right.
And, I kind of pinched myself because it was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a fairy tale kind of a dream. And then a couple years later when this happened, you realize, well, anything can happen at any point in time. We're ultimately not in control of a lot of these things, and it's about not necessarily what happens to us, but how we move forward with it and how we find a way to cope with it and move forward. I wrote in my book, I captured all of my story with Grant and my rebuilding process moving forward, which includes Kauai, because we moved there for his last 2 years. And that's a really great story. A very bittersweet place to be. Wonderful and beautiful, but difficult too. As I was a caregiver for Grant through his journey. And that journey, he had ALS for about 4.5 years until he passed away. And so I was his caregiver for quite a while. I married him knowing he was going to be dying from a terminal illness, and we took this journey together. And so my story shares that. It also shares a bit about anticipatory grief, which I think we don't talk about quite as much.
Yeah.
Right. And as well as, going through that journey as a caregiver. And then after that person passes away, you're the person who is left standing and you're rebuilding your life, moving forward. And in my case, in a very messy way, trying to find the light switch,
Oh yeah.
walking around in the dark for a while to move forward. And so, um, challenging situation, right? And that it's hard and it's painful. Um, but this was 1999 that he died. It's 2023 now. I certainly have been through a lot through those years, and that's included in this book. And I thought it was important to capture that journey for people because it wasn't neat and nice. It was incredibly messy and painful,
Yeah.
and to get to this place now.
Now, you mentioned a couple things there. First off, my heart is with you, as you already know. My heart is with you. There's no words, so I always like to remind people when you share stories like that, my heart is always with you. I understand the healing process. I understand the hurting process as well. That grief movement is definitely something different. And thank you for being here today and sharing that. And again, I wanna just touch on something because you said a couple things, but one really stuck out. Your father passed away through suicide, right?
Mhm.
And that is something that people don't talk about neither.
Yeah.
Not too often because I think there's a sense of shame that goes along with it, because of the questions that are left from the loved ones and things like that. And you were such a young lady,
Yeah.
having to deal with that and having a single mother, you
Mhm.
know. So often I have to ask, how was the relationship with your mother and and you and everyone else after that?
Yeah. Well, it was tough. It was
Yeah.
really difficult because, um, I came into this world, an unplanned pregnancy at 18 years old with my
Mhm.
mom, right? And she and my dad got married. She was a really good Catholic girl, and that's what you did back then in 1968.
This is true. This is true.
And, so they were kids. They were kids stumbling around trying to figure it out, having a baby um, and my dad was not in a good place, but I didn't know that at the time. I
Right,
idolized him, right? I mean, I was 5 years old when he died. Um, I didn't know that he was mentally ill. I didn't know that he was in depression. I didn't know that he was physically abusing my mother. I didn't know so many things, and when he passed away, my mom told me that he died in a car accident because back then, she didn't know how to tell a five-year-old that her father had killed himself,
right.
right?
Well, it's not talked about, right?
No.
Like I remember when I was a kid, and when someone passed away, the family really didn't talk about the loss too much. They talked about the individual and things like that, and a lot of times they drowned their grief in alcohol.
That's what I
Uh,
did. That's what I did for
and
years.
and it happens, right? Like we understand now that there's no wrong way of doing it. We're going to do it the best way that we know how, and we often revolt back to the things that brought us comfort. in the
Yeah.
first place, right? Things that can numb us. I'm look, I'm guilty of that, and mine was never alcohol. When I experienced mine was lifting weights, but it was a place that I can go to escape the reality.
Yeah.
Um, but I always had ill intentions towards myself.
Mm. Hmm.
And I say that because when I think about the alcohol, drowning our grief in alcohol and self medicated and things like that, I think we're looking for an escape from
Yes.
the reality. I mean, you're 5 years old. Your father just committed suicide. Now you got a family that's so distraught, and y'all trying to keep it together. And then you fast forward, and I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
And you're right, and I love that you said it. The anticipatory grief.
Yes.
You know,
And yeah, the anticipatory grief, but also I want to say the fears of abandonment that
yes,
you have from a parent passing away, it's it's becomes a part of you. In a lot of ways, it defines you
right,
when you're young and you let that define you, right? And Grant, my first husband, was actually he became a way for me to work through my fears of abandonment.
mhm,
That's ultimately kind of the lesson, the life lesson that I ended up learning through that experience. But yeah, I mean, he left me from a very loving place. Not that he wanted to leave, he didn't have control over that, right? But that
right,
was still something that I had to work through in a different level. But the anticipatory grief that we're talking about, not as many people talk about, is, how do you manage and function through anticipatory grief, which
right,
was for us, well, you have one of these illnesses, it's MS or it's ALS, it's one or the other. One of them's terminal. And the only way that we're going to know about that is as your symptoms progress and as you start showing more signs of this particular disease.
right. Now, because I experienced that myself with my mother, when she passed away from a stroke. And
Yeah,
I just remember, you
sorry.
know,
That's hard.
um, I flew out of Colorado, went back to Virginia, and I was just sitting in a room, and I told my sister, I said, I'm not leaving. Only way that I'm leaving is when she leaves, right? Either we're going to walk out of here, or they're going to be carrying her out of here. But other than that, I'm not leaving the room. You go ahead, do your thing. Take care of home, because I know life doesn't stop. I'm down here, so just go. And I think a part of me was just telling myself that I'm not going to leave right now, or I don't want to leave her, because I never wanted her to feel as if she was alone, because I was the son that was gone, right? I had
Yeah.
been gone for over 20, 28 years, 29 years at that time. And so I was like, you know what? I'm here now. I'm here. And my mother passed away from a stroke. And so what had ended up happening is that, and you chime in and let me know if I'm on the right path or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But when they told me that they were waiting for the big stroke to happen, my mind had switched over to where I now expect her not to make it.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? So there's a sense of understanding that came along. Now the pain was still there. Don't get me wrong. The pain was still there. I was bawling my eyes out, girl. Look,
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
and I was just like, wow, like I now understand that she's not going to come out of here, but I'm still not going to leave until she takes her last breath. So my mindset has switched over.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
now that I know that she's going to pass away, I can kind of breathe a little bit instead of having the hope that she's not going to make it,
Yeah.
but to make sure that she's comfortable and let her know that I'm constantly there and talking with her. Because
Absolutely.
we have a room full of family and things like that.
Ab
Was take us back to the moment where and walk us through that.
the anticipatory grief aspect of all of this,
Yes.
it was living day to day kind of with that, right? And I want to say that in the initial stages, right, you're kind of trapped in a fog and you're kind of in denial at the same time, right? You're like, really, like, this is what's going to happen. And you kind of have a cerebral, intellectual sense about it, but you're not always connecting with it here, right?
Right.
There is that, well, maybe somebody made a mistake, or maybe somebody doesn't really have this all figured out, or there is, I want to say, functional denial is kind of like
Mm.
what I want to call it. I think
No,
in functional denial, denial can serve us in some ways, right? Where, we're really trying to just put the pieces together and figure out, you know, wrapping our heads around it, so to speak, right? About like, well, what did I just hear, and what is it that we're going through with this now, right?
right.
And until you start seeing a person's health debilitating and you start seeing changes and things happening, you can kind of live in your normal life for a while. But depending on what has happened, whether it's, a car accident and somebody's in a coma, versus brain cancer versus a stroke like you're
Right.
experiencing, you don't know how much worse it's going to get, and versus a terminal illness that could take 5 years, 4.5 to 5 years to fully show up, over that time period. I think that, you're kind of grieving what you may be missing and losing, but you haven't lost it yet. And so, Grant and I would hold on to each other. We just cry our eyes out in bed for like hours, in that beginning stage where it was like, really, our dreams are going to come to an end because you have this, right? And then, there's the wishful thinking, and there's the bargaining, and there's the, what, I'm going to, I said at one point, I'm like, we'll give up everything and start over again if we can just have your health again, right?
Yeah.
And there's that bargaining piece, whether that's with God or whoever you pray to or whoever you connect with, but there's that bargaining piece. And then there's the sadness, and there's the hopefulness, and you kind of, it's a roller coaster of emotions that you're going through,
Yeah.
right? It is
Yeah.
so incredibly stressful. But what I want to say about that, if people are actually already in the hospital and they're, ill like your mother was, the human will to live is so strong. That is one thing that I wanna say, that as a hospice volunteer, when I went to Kauai Hospice and I did my volunteer training, they really talk about that will to live. Um, People are easy, they don't easily die. So, like, what I'm saying about that is, you're moving forward trying to wrap your head around the fact that somebody is ill, they're going to die at some point in time. You don't know when. It's probably going to be sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, you're living in a state of limbo. And that limbo, Tony, is you staying in that room and not leaving until she is leaving.
Yeah. Well, and another part of it is that I hadn't seen my mom in over 28 years, right?
Wow.
And
Wow.
the first thought was when I first got there, there was, the doctors was like, she's responding, and things like that. And they would call her name and she would respond, and then she opened up her eyes and she saw me, right? And now,
Mhm.
mind you, she's paralyzed from one side of her body. I did not know that. The doctors didn't say this. So when she saw me, she's trying to speak, and all of a sudden she just bust out and start crying. And I'm like, Mama, I'm here, right?
Oh,
And I automatically I grabbed her because you have to remember when a child when we're children, our first love is our mothers,
yes.
right? You know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely.
a boy's first love is his mom. So, when I saw her, I was so happy because I'm thinking to myself, hey, you know what I'm saying? I'm here. We walking out of here, right? And then
Yeah.
like, hey, we got to put her back to sleep. You know what I'm saying? Let her get some rest. I said, okay, I'm right here. So I never left the bedside. And I'm
Mm.
laying there, and all throughout the night, the doctors coming in, they're calling her name, and she's responding. Now, Here's where I got let down. When the doctor came in the next day, he flew in from where he did. He flew in from New York, so he was a brain specialist. So he comes in, and my sister and I are in the room, and we're looking at the monitor. And so he has to go back and read the paperwork where it's saying that she was being responsive throughout the night. But come to find out, she wasn't being responsive. She was having miniature strokes.
Mm,
She was
yes.
having miniature strokes, right? So my hope is out the window.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking to myself, like, what do you say? Because now I'm about to resort back to being a man, right? You know what I'm saying? Being an angry man. Like, I'm about to
Mm,
punch the doctor in the mouth. You can't sit up here and tell me this, right? Like, no, I just got home. I've been
yes.
gone for 48 years. I just got home. I want to be able
Yeah.
to talk to my mother, tell
Yeah.
her all the things that have been going on. And now he's saying, we're just waiting for this massive one to come. And this one's going to take her. Now we have to make a decision whether or not if we're going to leave her in a vegetative state or we're going to let her go peacefully. So I talked to my sister and we were like, hey, mom would be miserable if she was in a vegetative state. So we have to do what's right by her. And
Yeah.
so decision to do it. And I was just like you said, the bargaining was there. Like, come on, you know what I'm saying? If you give me 1 week with her,
Yeah.
right? You know what I'm saying? Just to talk with her, to hear her voice, to see
Mm,
her smile, to let her know that her baby boy is grown up, that I've gotten myself together,
yeah.
right? And I think there was a sense of guilt that came along with that because I never got the chance to tell her.
Absolutely.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was just like, and I carried that with me for quite some time,
Mhm. Mhm.
and not understanding how it would affect me
Mhm.
began to move through this thing called grief because I never understood it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I didn't even know what anticipatory grief
No.
was.
It's the grief wilderness is what it is.
Right,
Like, you don't know how you're gonna respond in it.
right. And you never, I mean, because everybody's going to respond differently, right? And I've talked
Absolutely.
to a lot of people, and there were some people who had a great support group. And you know what I'm saying? And when they finally came out of their dark place, they were like, hey, I need to stage my own intervention. I need to talk about what's going on. I got a guy right now that I
Yeah.
talk to, and he's like, dude, this is what I did, right? Then I
Yeah.
talked to some people, men and women alike. And this is what I want to make sure that the audience gets. You know what I'm saying? Like, what you're going through is totally normal. And if you don't
Absolutely.
understand it, it's fine too. But
And it
surround.
doesn't have to look like what anybody else's
Right,
grief
right.
looks like.
Yeah, and I tried that. I actually did try that, right? I was like, man, I need to surround myself with other men like myself who have lost a mother or lost a child or lost a parents, lost a brother. I need to surround myself with these men to see how they did it, right? Because I have no clue. I
Right.
have no clue. And it was a good friend of mine that came through,
Mhm.
and I just remember he said, "Hey, can I speak with you?" I said, yeah, I'm already mad, right? He goes, man, I understand what you're going through. So as soon as he says that, I'm like, here we go again with this crap. You know what I'm saying? He goes, man, I said, and so I cut him off. I said, look, how do you know what I'm going through?
Yeah.
Because I'm watching your life right now, and you're a happy dude.
Yeah.
You're good. You're a good-hearted dude. How do you know what I'm going through? I don't think you understand. This
Mhm.
man said something that shook my world. He goes, man, I lost my son when he was 5 months old.
Wow.
That right there, I stopped. Now, as crazy as it sounds, when he said that, there was a sense of relief that came across my shoulders because now I'm like, whoa, I'm not by myself,
Yeah.
right? I'm not by
Absolutely.
myself. And so I was
Absolutely.
able to talk to him. I said, man, how did you do it? He goes, man, I'm gonna tell you what they did to me. He goes, I went to the doctor. They saw me in all kinds of. They saw me this, and they handed me a bag of Xanax. They told me, come back when you're done.
Yes, hello. I was living the Zoloft dream for a while.
Oh my God. And I
Mhm.
never went that route, right? Because there was a part of me, I guess it's just it was the man in me, right? The aggressive part of me that was saying this life is not going to beat me and I'm going to face this thing head on,
Yeah,
right? And I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm pretty sure you can relate to this. It handed me my butt.
really.
Yeah, it handed me my butt on so many levels. It had me flipped up, dragged through the mud by one foot, picked up the other foot, and dragged me back the other way. I promise, man. And then listening to yours, I was like, man, I bet you she could relate to that right
Yeah,
there. You know?
absolutely. Absolutely. Everyone's grief journey is individual. I think, the connection that we can have with other people through our grief experience, though,
Mm,
is really profound. And I think if people can feel validated, supported, heard, seen, in some way they get that validation that they're not alone. That was the reason why I wrote my book, so that someone could connect with.
right.
It doesn't have to look pretty. It can be really ugly. And you know what? And you're still going to be okay. You're going to move through this, as messy as it is, as awful as you feel, as devastated as you feel.
Mhm.
You will be able to find your way through this successfully. And I say that in a way that it's subject to definition with whatever that looks like for
Yes. Yeah.
somebody, right? But if someone doesn't give you that as an option, you might not think that it is. You know, and I
Very true.
will say that it doesn't mean it's easy and it's really hard, but that grief work that you need to do for yourself, whatever that looks like,
Mhm.
there's no going around it. You have to go through it to get to the other side of it.
Right. Now you mentioned some too, and I want to touch on it because I kind of can relate to what you said about drowning your sorrows in alcohol and things like that. Because I was an alcoholic for a very long
Yep.
time in my life, and I think it was just because of the grief I dealt with during my childhood
Yeah.
and things like that. Growing up into adulthood, it was a way I could numb myself,
Yeah.
but I was
Yeah.
really good at being emotionally detached from things, uh,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I never
I was
understood,
living my party girl self, you know,
right? Yeah.
and you could numb yourself that way and, you know, try to move forward, living your life in whatever way that you could.
This is true. This is true. So I have to ask, when was your aha moment? That
Oh,
you said, you know what? No more. I'm
yeah,
not. I'm not going to do
yeah,
this. And I'm leading up into where you started writing your book because I think it's a beautiful transition
yeah.
there. So when was your aha moment? You know what I'm saying? Where you was, I mean, because I can say for me, it was me. I was sitting around and I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the Tony
Yeah.
that's in front of you. Like I had lost all kinds of weight. Like I could see my cheekbones, and I was standing in the mirror. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I had a tall boy of natural ice.
Mhm.
And then sitting on the edge of the sink, I had a half a bottle, half a gallon of tequila that
Yeah.
I was about ready to finish off.
Yeah.
And I looked at myself and a voice in my head say, "Do you see what I see?"
Yeah.
And I go, "Yeah." And I took both of them, poured them down the sink, and I
Yeah.
walked away. And I was like, you know what? I have to do something. But
Yes.
that choice there, because during that time when I was drinking, I had people that were feeding me alcohol, and I had a
Mhm.
place to stay.
Yeah.
Right? When
Yeah.
I stopped, that choice right there cost me everything. Meaning that I no longer had a place to stay because I no longer was feeding the alcohol. right?
Right.
And I wanted something different. So I went through detox,
Yeah.
and since I couldn't do that, well, I ended up having to leave the place I was, which put me out on the streets.
Wow.
Figure so yeah, I had to figure it out. I had to kind of like figure it out. What was your
That's a
aha
tough
moment?
place to be.
That was a tough, yeah, yeah.
Well, my aha moment was I was kind of playing with the monkey mind of drinking. So for me, I was the party girl alcoholic, right? Where I would just, you know, I would just be going out to the bars and I would be, partying with my friends and, getting together with men in a promiscuous way and just kind of like doing my thing, right?
Yeah.
My aha moment was here in Denver. I had stopped drinking for a few months, and then I kind of was wined and dined one evening by a gentleman that I did not know that he was a drug dealer.
Mm,
And um, and he gradually, kind of got me drinking again. And I was like, oh, well, just going to get a bottle of Cristal champagne and I'm going to get some of this. And it was like just kind of tailoring to that, you know, need to like be spoiled and that kind of a thing. And within 2 months, I got in a car and I started driving and I had been really drunk. I did not get a drunk driving. I did not kill anybody, but I did $3,000 worth of damage to my car hitting a curb.
oh
I
wow.
could have I could have killed somebody. I
Right.
I woke up the next morning not remembering some of my night, but remembering that part of my night and going, I can't do this anymore. I can't be trusted when I'm drinking to not get in a car and drive. I'm like, I have no discernment. I have no responsibility to be drinking anymore. And that was my reality. And that was 18 years ago
Right.
in October. And so um, I think everyone who has a drinking problem is not necessarily an alcoholic, but I had alcoholism on both sides of my family. And I did have mood shifts that would happen when I was drinking. And clearly, when you start planning your events around alcohol and or you're planning for how you're going to be drinking and when you're going to be drinking and what that all looks like and drinking as an event and or you're planning for when you're going to have that um that was just the reality to me that I could have killed somebody.
Mm,
I could have, I mean, I probably was more concerned about killing somebody else than killing myself at that time, right?
right.
And so, I started with AA and then I realized AA really wasn't for me. And I just found, my own way, but it was cutting people out of my life that weren't good for me anymore. It was breaking up with, the boyfriend. It was letting go of friends who were my party friends. It was finding new support systems, like you said. I was a functional alcoholic. So I was
Yeah.
people would say, I never knew that you had a drinking problem. Some people would say that to me. I just thought you were a lot of fun to go out with, I'm like, I was till I wasn't.
Oh, you my sister from another mother, man. You because the same thing. You're like I was a functional alcoholic. I used to. You ever
If
see those
throwing
little
up in the
stories?
basket at work is being functional, I don't know, but
I
like
never
whatever.
threw up though, right? Because I used to get. You remember they used to. Well, they still sell them. The little shooters of Smirnoffs in the pack.
Mhm.
So I would get four of those, right? Different flavors. And you know how Colorado heat is, 110 degrees sometimes,
Yeah,
but in the summertime it gets hot. And I
yeah.
was doing construction at the time. And I used to, no one ever even knew. So they would send me way over to go dig a ditch somewhere in the heat. And I would go over there with my pickaxe and my shovel. I'm walking across the field, all over there by my lonesome. Now I would dig the ditch, but then I would sit over there and I would down 4 or 5 of them. And I would drink this throughout the day, and no one knew.
Mm,
No one knew. And then when I got home, because I wasn't working a regular job, I was working through day labor.
mhm,
So I was making maybe 50, $60 a day or something,
mhm,
somewhere around there. And I would
mhm,
take 40 of that, and I go buy alcohol and go stash it somewhere, right? Because you got to remember, I'm homeless too.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm homeless. So, you know what I'm saying? I'll go find myself a place and go stash it somewhere. Then I'll go take $20 and go to the bar,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
I would buy me a pitcher of beer and a
Mm,
game of pool.
mhm.
And from the rest of the night on, I never had to buy another drink because from all the pool, people just bought me drinks. Oh
Yeah.
my God, he's killing it. I was like, yeah, and I'm drunk off my butt. But no
Yeah.
one ever knew, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I leave the bar, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning, close the bar down, go find my little stash, go sit in the bush somewhere and drink that until daylight comes up, right?
Mm,
No one knew. And I guess there was that side of me that wanted somebody to see
mhm.
what was going on with me,
Yeah.
right? And no one ever did. I guess in a way, I was looking for somebody to come rescue me,
Yeah.
come and say, "Hey, man, come on, I see you,
Yeah.
Tony," and no one ever did. And I just remember that crash, you know, that realization
Yeah.
of
But
if
then
you
you found that within yourself in
well, actually,
that one
actually,
day.
I didn't. Actually, you want to know how I found it? I didn't find it within myself because I was still drinking
Mhm.
when I met my son's mother,
Okay.
and when she got pregnant, that's when I said, you know what,
Mm,
to stop for him because I don't want him to think that this is okay, even when he was inside of her stomach. So I
yeah.
stopped for the bases around him, and when he was born, I understood why. Right?
Mhm.
I found that reason to not want to go out and drink, and
Good.
then there it was just like I am going to I have to change my ways. But there was a lot of things I had to learn, right? I didn't know what it was like to I mean, because growing up and things like that, you think a man just goes around and sleeps with women all the time, right? That's I was young,
Yeah.
and I was just hung out in the clubs and the bars and stuff,
Yeah.
right? Women,
Yeah.
hey girl, hey, come here.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and that's what it was like, right? Go out drinking,
Mhm.
what I'm saying, have the occasional one night stand or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And and then you wake up, and a lot of times I would wake up not knowing where I was. So
Mhm.
I don't. Somebody needs to come and get me.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
nights like that, right? But that boy, my son, changed everything about me
Yeah.
because for one, I didn't know what is.
Mm.
I didn't know what a man was,
Mhm.
and I definitely didn't know what a father was.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I had to learn all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think what it was, began to pray about it.
Mhm.
And I said, I don't have a role model. I need someone to teach me. Then it dawned on me, who's the best father that you know? Right. And this is just for me. This is just my beliefs and
Yeah.
everything. But I said, God is the best father I know.
Mm.
He loves me unconditionally. Right. So let me model my actions behind his.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Or her, however person wants to refer them,
Mhm.
or them or not, right? And then that's what started teaching me how to be a father and to walk the path of fatherhood. And
Yeah.
then being a man, I modeled it around God as well, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
What I thought that a man was, you know what I'm saying? A man,
Mhm.
you stand up for yourself,
Yeah.
provide for your family. You don't go out here, you don't do stupid stuff because when you're a kid, you think like a kid, and as an adult, you think like an adult, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna tell you the biggest lesson that I learned,
Mhm.
that I had to throw that out the window because my son taught me how to be a kid again. It wasn't
They'll
about
do that, won't they?
yeah,
I don't have my own kids, but I have step girls, and and being around kids, they do teach you how to be,
yeah,
don't
yeah.
they?
I was like, well, shoot, I'm gonna go climb the tree. He brought my childhood back out of me, and I
Yeah,
was like,
that's
really?
wonderful.
Is that what we doing? We're gonna go climb the tree. We're gonna swing in the swing. We're gonna climb on the monkey bars, of course. And yes, I'm gonna trip you up when you're running from me too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
But
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's powerful.
I think a lot of people forget that though, right? You know what I'm saying? We get as we're talking, we get so wrapped up into the sadness around grief, the anger around grief, that this is what we associate grief with, right? And you've done something that was truly amazing. Like you managed to take all of that and write a book,
Yeah.
right? What
And writing a book that has a beautiful story. It's, mostly set on Kauai. It's a beautiful island. I incorporate Hawaiian culture into it,
Mhm.
the beauty of the island, right? But I also am people tell me I'm very raw in it. I'm very vulnerable.
Right.
The
Yeah.
first sentence has probably a really bad swear word in it, right?
That's okay.
Um, but like, it's very real. It's very real life. And it has to be in order for people to connect with that, right? But I
Right.
also try to incorporate humor into it, because if you can't laugh about some of these things, you are going to cry, and you might do both. You
Yeah.
know, I talk about the ridiculous things that people say to you when you're grieving, and I talk about crazy grief brain stories that I've got. And I talk about stumbling around in the dark and looking for the light switch in my underwear for years,
Right.
because that's where I was, right? But you have to look at some of this with humor, but maybe I wasn't looking at it in a humorful way at that time, but I can look at it and point out some of those things now,
Well,
right?
yeah, yeah. Now I have to ask because I think we all, everyone who's going through grief or have gone through grief, you said something that we all experience. What was some of the crazy stuff that people said to you?
Well, I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
well, crazy things happened. Um, so sometimes people would say things, right? Like, your life's gonna go back to normal. Like, my life has never been normal. What is normal anyway, right?
Right.
Or, you're young, you're gonna find another man, and you're gonna get married and have a baby someday, and you're like, don't know what's going to happen for me, right? I mean, it's just the things that people would say that were somewhat minimizing, right, of your experience and what you're going through at that time.
Right.
Um, or, happiness is a choice. And, here's the book that you can read about it. You're like, really?
Oh yeah.
Like, grief is in a totally different world, right? And, you know, yeah, you just kind of sit in that and you kind of go, "Oh, what are you talking about? Like, have you ever been grieving?" Like, um, but the one of the weirdest things that happened, is sometimes people treat you the way I think they want to be treated. At one of the memorial services I was at, one of Grant's family members gave me a bag of drugs. I kid you not. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with these? Well, take them up north and have a great time. I'm like, seriously, do you think I need to do LSD right now? Like, what? I'm like,
Oh,
you gotta be kidding me.
oh my god. I don't think I've
Um,
ever had that one. I don't think I've ever had that one because I don't think. I mean, I no. I mean, because acid on itself, without any other thing, would take you to a place that you don't want to be there, right?
yeah,
You know,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
not a. Mm-mm.
no,
It,
I'm thinking, who is this person? And do they think they know me well enough to give me a bag of tranquilizers?
Apparently so. Apparently so. But I can agree with what you just said right there, and I just want to add something to it.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times when people don't know what to do or don't know what to say, I think they try to relate to us in the best way that they know how, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
it's something that we both have found out that grief has no blueprint, right?
No.
There's no right or wrong way to do it. You're going to do it the best way that you know how because this is yours. It's like a fingerprint, right? You know what I'm saying? It's individual to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I found later on as I began to walk this path of grief and beginning to build that intimate relationship with it, it began to teach me. It
Yes.
became my mentor, right? It became my sidekick, but not in a negative way, but
Mm.
in a way to help me understand others, right? And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is that as I was going through it, people used to say stuff to me. I realized that it wasn't personal.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't personal. So the craziest thing that I had somebody compare, they compared losing their dog to me losing my child.
Ooh.
Hold on, but now here's the kicker part to it, right? The individual that said it never had kids,
Mm-hmm.
so he related his
Mm-hmm.
pet as his child.
Yeah.
Now, granted, to us, we're looking at it going, "That's not what you're supposed to do." Now, if you look at it in the same sense of this is all that he has
Mm-hmm.
in reference to what I'm going through.
Yes.
Do you now take it personal or do you look at them and say, thank you for trying for understanding, but not trying to
Mm.
understand, but understanding
Yeah.
from your perspective?
Yes.
So now life has taken on a different meaning, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
meaning of your grief has taken on his own perception of
Yes.
empathy and compassion, not just for others, but for the world in general,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because people mean no harm when they do that. Now, I don't know about the acid thing, but I don't know about that. But I mean, but if you really think about it, maybe that's the way that he was dealing with the grief.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. And you're exactly right. I mean, people can only compare to something that they've gone through.
right, right,
I think that a lot of the time people are just afraid to say anything. But what people have to remember is they don't have to say anything. They can just be there. And the interesting thing that came from somebody giving me feedback about my book, Tony, was this book helped this person to
mm,
show up for people who were grieving in a much more sensitive, better way.
I love
And I didn't even think about that, of course, when I was writing it, but that it has had that impact with people reading it is
right,
really powerful, right? Because it helps people think about how they show up for other people who are grieving. And they're like, I'm not going to be that person that says that.
right,
Or maybe I've been that person who said that. One of my friends told me, oh, maybe I've been that person who has said that. Oh my God.
right. I
Why
think
didn't
we all have at some point, right?
Right. Or minimizing somebody's experience, right? Minimizing anybody's experience of what they've gone through.
Hmm.
Um, and I know some people, when I'd say, well, my husband died, they say, oh, well, I've been divorced, but my husband didn't die. And I would stop people and say, no, don't minimize what you have been through
I love that.
because it's your experience and it still is so hard.
Right.
And maybe in some ways harder than my experience, you
And
know?
and yes, well, think about it. Reality is perception, and your perception is your reality, right? So even though we've walked this painful road, we've seen it from the eyes of who Sheila and Tony is,
Yeah,
right, in this
yeah,
world.
yeah,
And people are
absolutely.
watching us, right?
Yep,
And they're experiencing life on their own terms.
Absolutely, and they're thinking probably about the different experiences that they've had or that
Right,
they're having right now like, I told my sister-in-law when my brother-in-law died, I'm like, "People are gonna say stupid shit. People are gonna say things to you that you're not gonna believe. People are gonna floor you, just know that's gonna happen." And she said if I hadn't told her that when it happened, she would have been more shocked than surprised.
right, exactly. Right. Because I mean, I think that's the initial response, right? Think about how many times you've been shocked when somebody tell you you had to bite your tongue, goes like, I'll cuss you the fuck out, man.
Yeah,
Like I know that was for me. And I think the craziest thing, um, I was going to church at the time. And the week after my son passed away, I went back to church. And people are looking at me like, how are you still standing, my man? Like,
yeah,
you just lost your. And I was like, I'm here.
yeah.
I'm here. Now, I had I had ill intentions for doing it. Again, that was my way of saying, you're not going to beat me.
Right.
No matter what you do to me, you're not going to beat me. And I was wrong. And
Yeah.
I can admit that I was wrong. But I went to church and I remember the guy that was standing behind the counter. He goes, "Man, I am so sorry that you had to go through this."
Mhm.
And I said, "Yeah." And the words that came out of his mouth after that, I almost punched him in his mouth. He goes, "Well, at least you're young enough to where you can have another child."
Yep, that's
Woo!
painful. Mm.
Yes. And I looked at him. I said, "Well, that's nice of you to assume that I can have another child." He
Yeah,
goes, "What do you mean?" I say, "See, your assumptions. Here's where I get to make you look like an ass." I said, "I can't have any more kids." When my son was born, he was the last. I had a vasectomy.
yeah,
I can't have any more kids. And he stopped and he looked at me. He goes, "Oh, exactly.
yeah,
Next time, watch what you say, right? Be mindful of the person that you're saying it to, and do not think that everything that you say is right.
right.
Never assume anything."
And if
And
you do, don't be afraid to apologize,
I never got that.
right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do think sometimes people are trying their best, but their best is really just very strong failures.
This
Um,
is true.
and that's why I just say, if you don't know what to say, don't say anything, you
This
know?
is I
Just
like that
be
too.
physically present. You can ask people if you could give them a hug, you can, um, I think that people just need to be more thoughtful about what they're saying or how they're coming across. And if they're afraid and they don't know what to say, just show up and don't say anything.
Yeah, I
And
love
sometimes just
that.
showing up is enough.
Right. But I don't think a lot of people know how to show up neither, right?
No.
Because think about it this way, right? A lot of times when people do show up, they bring food, right? And oftentimes they're coming in, they're in a rush, right? Not in the rush to go do anything. They're just in a rush to get from around you, right? But they're bringing this as a good gesture, right? This is what they tell me I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Bring
Right.
food, bring cars. We're gonna help you pay the bills and things. But that's the honeymoon stage. I've
Right.
been I've been trying to tell people that, like, that's the honeymoon stage. I know that you're going to do this. Now the key to it is, and we talked about this a little bit. The ones who stay around when everyone else is gone.
Yes.
Mm.
Those
Those,
those are your anchors.
those are the anchors, yes. And then I was so honored and privileged to have just a handful of people
Yes. Me
that
too.
was my anchor, right?
Me
That
too.
when I was sinking on that ship, they were there to go, "Hey, Tom, stand up, brother.
Yep.
Stand up."
Yes.
Yeah, the water's only waist deep. It's-
Yes. And, what I talk about in my book also is people to not be afraid also to try to reach out to people when they need them. It's hard, but sometimes you do need to do that.
Mhm.
And I say, those people who are around you, who are there for you, who are your anchors, will be there to help you figure things out if you need them to help
Yeah,
you figure
yeah,
things out.
I
You
love that.
right? I say go to the most resourceful person that you know and tell them you need help, and they're gonna help you figure it out. They'll at least have some good ideas, to support
This
and
is
help you.
true, right? And I think we often tell people this: go find your tribe. But what we forget to tell people, sometimes your tribe will find you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's the people that you least expect that's going to stay around, that's going to help be a part of that tribe that you're with, right? And all the rest of them, don't take it personal if they don't stay around. Don't
Absolutely.
take it personal, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not personal.
You're
It's
gonna
not
define
personal.
you're gonna redefine your entire address book,
Yeah, yeah.
your entire contact list in your phone, right? Based on who shows up for you and who
Mhm.
can be there for you through that time.
And it's a sense of trust. It's a sense of trust. You trust this individual with the most vulnerable parts of
Yeah.
you because
Yeah.
they're watching what you're going through, right?
Absolutely. And I say, in my book, that rawness of grief, that vulnerability of grief, it is really like walking around naked in public.
Yeah. And
Uh,
pick up your book again. I want to see the cover of your book. I love that. Over the rainbow, from the depths of grief to hope. I love that. And that's on Amazon. Yes.
it's available on Amazon. It came out October 19th and it's doing well. It got a bestseller status and I'm super excited. Yeah, I really, I wanted to connect with people and help them not feel so alone.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've done that in a very strong way. So I'm proud of that. So thank you for letting me share that.
Of
Um,
course. Of course.
yeah. I also have a companion journal that goes with this that I'm offering on my website, SheilaClemenson.com, and they can download it for free for right now. It's just
Mhm.
kind of a trial, seasonal kind of a thing. But I have suggestions and exercises kind of after each chapter and each theme of chapter that really is about taking care of yourself through that grief wilderness and really doing a deeper dive in, your own grief experience. Um,
Right.
so,
I love that. See, you in Colorado, so I'm coming to get my signed copy. You,
okay, I
I'm
can't
coming to
wait.
get my signed copy.
I'm doing an event at Boulder Bookstore next month,
Yeah.
January 17th.
January. You know what? I'm doing a Deaf Cafe January 13th.
Okay, well, let's
So
connect. We'll
yeah,
connect
up
with
here
each
in Fort
other that
Collins, right?
way. Okay.
Yes. Well, I'm. It's something wrong with me, Sheila. It's something wrong with me, okay? Because I was like, I've never done the Deaf Cafe before, but I was like, I would do one. And then when I put it out there, I was like, yeah, we just going with it now.
It's a it's a deaf cafe?
It's a Death Cafe.
Okay, so tell me what this is.
Okay, so a Death Cafe, know how we often don't like the conversation around death and dying, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm in the
Avoid it
process
like the
of
plague.
getting right. No one likes to play or even talk about it. It's such a negative stigma based around it. So I'm in the process of getting my death doula um, certification, my end of life certification.
Oh,
Yes. So
that's a calling.
yes, and I was just like, wow, how cool would it be to step in as someone gets that gets that diagnosis, right?
Yeah,
And instead of them trying to figure out everything, I sit down with them and go, what is it that you want?
yeah,
How do you envision your transition? Do you want your family around? Is there music being played? I want you to live your best possible life from beginning through the transition, and I want to make sure that your family's taken care of
Wow.
after your transition. So I'm taking care of. I'm making the phone calls to make sure that the bills are being
Yeah.
taken care of. I'm just so you don't have to worry about it. I want you to live your best life. I'm making sure that I got
Mhm.
a contact with the funeral home. You know what I'm saying? Do you want to be cremated? Is there a casket that you're looking for? Let me know. I'm going to talk
That's
to
a
them.
calling, Tony. That's a calling.
Grief is a calling. Grief is the calling, right?
Yeah, it
And
is.
there's so much more to it, right? You know what I'm saying? So we sit around, we talk about it. If you're afraid of dying, we talk about it. What are you afraid about, right?
Yeah,
How do you
absolutely.
your estate being separated when you're
Yeah.
gone,
Mm.
right? So we're taking the fear out of it. I want you to imagine the best transition for yourself to alleviate the worries from your family, so they
Yeah,
don't have to fight and try to figure this thing out when you're gone, right?
absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it's a little bit more to it, but it's so in depth. We're not talking about grief there. We're not coming up with answers and things like that. We're just coming up with a game plan for you.
Yeah,
That's it, and it's your game plan because you got to remember, it's your grief is your death journey, right?
yeah,
It's your transition. I want to make sure that you have the best transition possible.
absolutely.
You know,
Well, you walk that path, like I walked that journey with Grant,
yeah,
and I was there with him. You'll read the Secret Beach story in my book, which is I was there with him helping that happen, the day that he passed away. And I was with him when he passed away. And you have that experience, and you know, as sad as it can be, sometimes you're able to create a meaningful experience that can be really beautiful, right? And
it's
and knowing that you're on that journey with people, and people can feel like they have a little bit more control over how they're moving out of this world, can be beneficial and helpful for everybody. So, like, I know I've got a great friend who's a death doula who does estate planning, and she's an attorney. I should connect the two of you, and you guys should have a conversation, because that might be a good connection for you too. But
hey,
um, but yeah, it's powerful, and I want you to know it means so much to me that I was able to share this time with you,
yes.
and and this experience with our audience, and that we're here to support people.
Yes. And before we wrap it up, where can people find you?
People can find me two separate places: SheilaClemenson.com and transitionscoachingservices.com.
Awesome, awesome. And I do believe I have your social media links as well, which I did put them in the comments, but I'll make sure that I got it put out there and everything. Now,
Thank you so much.
yeah, of course, of course. I always ask my guests this before I let them go. If you could leave the audience with something, what would you give them?
I hold this space with what I do from a career coaching place, that life is really short and we never know how much time we've got. So, how do you want to spend your valuable time every day? Right.
Hmm.
And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. As you move through your grief process and you move forward, you are looking to connect with something more meaningful and more purposeful. And it's important to be thoughtful about that, and to, find your way kind of in what was this experience that you've moved through supposed to bring you, so that you can do some amazing things in the world with
Yeah,
it, like you're doing, Tony. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm humble. I'm humbly going to say thank you, right? Because sometimes, like you said, sometimes you don't have to say anything. It's just a simple thank you, and You filled my heart with gratitude and
Yeah.
appreciation. Thank you so much. And
You-
and
you-
thank you for being on the show today and being so open and vulnerable and
Thank
sharing
you.
your story and your book, of course. So people, go check out her book, right?
Please do.
Yeah, go get her book. Let's push this thing across the edge. Help her become that international bestseller out there because she's worth it. And if you guys enjoy conversations like this, and if you made it this far and you haven't already, do me a favor, head over to that YouTube channel, Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop an amazing episode. And if you know anyone who can benefit from the conversations that we're having, do me a favor, leave a comment and share this with them. And with that being said, Sheila, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. And for everyone else out there, thank you for tuning in and thank you for the support. And until next time, we love you. Keep your head up. Peace.
Thank you so much, Tony.
You're very welcome.
It was a joy.